Every time a new billionaire is created, I get a tattoo of their face on my chest. So when I had to get inked up 18 times over the last decade to celebrate a bunch of guys who became billionaires off of a mysterious new darling of finance called private credit, I just knew something was afoot. So afoot that it's got the rest of Wall Street fighting for a turn at the money hose, and of course a coveted spot next to my right nipple. So what's this thing that's getting everyone rich now? Huh? I started my investigation by watching what's well known to be the horniest media outlet we got spinning today. Bloomberg.
Private credit remains the hottest market.
Private credit is kind of the sexiest story on the street.
It's very sexy.
Private credit, it's like the hottest thing on the street.
Private credit is so hot.
Private credit is looking more attractive.
Private credit is getting so hot.
Private credit is really attractive.
Private credit as an industry really has come of age.
I'm glad I'm not the only one who finds this arousing. Seeing words like explosive growth, mega deals, shadow banking, and not a bubble just give me a tingle in my journalists. But like most times I'm aroused, I'm also deeply confused.
It's really simple. Even credit, for a lot of viewers, that sounds kind of weird and, finance speak. It's just funds making loans to businesses. And that's all it is. And there's nothing really that sexy about it.
Speak for yourself, Robert Smith, corporate finance editor at the Financial Times. Some of us are attracted to highly profitable businesses and would love to get to know them better.
Essentially, private credit is just a loan being made, usually to a pretty risky company, a highly indebted one, from a non-bank. So sometimes they call it non-bank lending, and it's an almost $2 trillion market. And it's up almost 10 times what it was right before the financial crisis.
Maureen Farrell is a reporter for the New York Times covering Wall Street.
Before the great financial crisis in 2008, you could essentially go to a bank for a pretty risky loan. Afterwards, because of all the regulations around banks, it became a lot trickier for banks to go take money from depositors and put it in a risky loan. They were worried about companies not paying it back.
That's why private credit firms like Apollo, Ares, Blue Owl, and Oaktree swooped in from outside the traditional banking system and offered to lend to these risky businesses in exchange for some hefty interest rates and fees. This is making them rich as hell, and all those clams are attracting young professionals to private credit like a moth to moth food.
They are getting top talent, these firms now. People are graduating from Wharton or Harvard or MIT, and rather than saying, I want to go work for Goldman, they're saying, I want to go work for Apollo, or I want to go work for Blue Owl.
Matt Wirz is a reporter covering credit for the Wall Street Journal.
Recently, I was in Hudson Yards, which is this fancy new kind of office area, and I was on the escalator, and the woman in front of me had a backpack, and it was one of those swag backpacks. It was a nice one. I think it was an Osprey. And it had a Blue Owl logo on it.
That's right. Nothing announces the arrival of a Wall Street titan like a fresh new bougie hiking backpack. Fuck your JanSport. And it seems like all these guys are making a decent amount of money without going through the usual Wall Street humiliation rituals.
I have a much better work-life balance, I think, than people that work in IB or, on Wall Street doing this type of stuff, which I appreciate. I'm not having to chug vodka Red Bulls to grind out 10 different merger memos in an IB shop. And just for color, just me, one guy, what I manage in terms of loan dollars, I probably have 15 that I'm on. And in total, just the loan capitalization, it's probably close to $1 billion.
Time for a quick break so I can tell you all about something that could not be more important to me. My seashell selling side hustle and the website builder that makes it possible, Hostinger Horizons. When covering the world of business news gets too hectic, I like to turn my phone off and head down to the seashore, where I fill up sacks full of seashells and schlep those suckers back home to sell them on my website. For decades, the side hustle seashelling business has been dominated by Sally, my 8-year-old neighbor, and a capitalistic tyrant. But thanks to these easily crafted websites, her chokehold on seashellmanship is over. This would all have been impossible without Hostinger Horizons. Hostinger Horizons is a no-code web app and website builder that makes effortless websites and web app creation accessible to all. So say you're a seashell seller and you need a digital presence to break into the highly competitive online seashell marketplace. You fire up Hostinger Horizons, this nifty little AI chat box pops up, you tell it what you want your site to be and what you want it to look like. In my case, a sexy site for shilling, slinging, soliciting, and selling seashells. And voila! With Hostinger Horizons, your site can go up live in one click. Super chill. You can manage web hosting, domains, and email all in one place. They've got expert support available 24 hours, 7 days a week, and it's risk-free with their 30-day money-back guarantee. I mean, what more could you want? Not much, folks. Not much. Get a free trial today with Hostinger Horizons and use my code to get 10% off your first month. Just go to hostinger.com/goodwork and enter the code GOODWORK. Except for you, Sally. You've stuffed your fat pockets with olive shells and dollars long enough. Hostinger Horizons is for the people. See you on the beaches, scallywags. Private credit is high risk, high reward compared to the boring old stock market, but it's seen as a pretty safe investment compared to something like private equity. Haha, missed me again. Now in private equity, you buy a piece of a company and then try to maximize its profits. But that also means you can lose your entire investment if the company implodes. In private credit, you're just lending money to a company and then getting a steady drip of interest payments back. In theory, a pretty reliable way to invest in private, potentially riskier companies. And investors have been a-flocking.
Pension funds, it's teachers, firefighters, university endowments, and sovereign wealth funds. And they go to these people because these new private credit providers have sought to get huge amounts of money to lend. And those are the people who write the biggest checks.
Love the biggest checks. My favorite size. I'm talking area. Those big novelty checks, send them to daddy. I want them. And all that new money has tripled the size of the private credit industry over the last decade to $1.5 trillion. That's tripled, as in tripled. Maureen?
You start seeing these newly minted billionaires. Everyone's telling you this, it's the hottest, can't lose investment. And I think anytime anything grows so quickly out of nowhere, it feels like you have to take a look at it. It feels like it needs scrutiny.
You want scrutiny? Well, let me take it from here, acclaimed New York Times journalist. While private credit is advertised as having pretty safe and steady returns, these companies borrowing money can be pretty unreliable and sometimes can't pay back their debts. In just the past year, the Chicken Soup for the Soul company couldn't pay back their loan of over $60 million. Zips Car Wash had to ask for an extension on its payment because it was bleeding cash. The tech bros over at CoreWeave borrowed $7.5 billion to buy and rent out NVIDIA chips, but then violated the agreement. Education software company Pluralsight got taken over by their debt collectors because they couldn't pay, and paper manufacturer Progest was accused of using their loan to fund their Prosecco vineyard and buy a yacht. Personally, wouldn't get mad at Progest for that. And while these are all isolated instances, some experts worry that they could get more common.
So there's truly a question of what will happen if the economy starts running into trouble, and it's just very untested.
There's been no test yet of this enterprise under really sustained risk and pressure financially.
Senator Jack Game Time Reed of Rhode Island sits on the Senate Banking Committee and has petitioned the Federal Reserve to impose more oversight on the private credit industry. He notes that private credit is just a widowed Gen Z baby that doesn't know how to drive stick or navigate a financial crisis. His own words.
So if interest rates remain high, that means the cost of the debt for these companies remains high. If you combine that with a recession where their revenue is going down and inflation where their costs are going up, then you could actually see a lot of companies having difficulty paying back their debt at the same time. That's going to be a real test.
Private credit grew like a motherfucking weed in the low-rate, high-growth 2010s. But now, the economy is showing signs of recession and rates are higher, which means borrowing companies are making less in cash and paying more in loans because of those rising interest rates. In fact, now over a third of private credit borrowers now owe more in interest than they generate in earnings. And all this adds up to a potential nightmare scenario. A especially when you throw in that regulators have basically no jurisdiction over private credit. Because of private.
Some of this stuff is a bit Schrodinger's cat, right? You have a box, which is your private credit fund, and it's only really at the end of the 7 years, however long your money's locked up for, that you get to open it up and find out whether the cat's alive or dead. So yeah, might be quite a few dead cats kicking around in a few years.
The scariest part, though, is just how big it's become out of nowhere and how opaque it is. You can't really see the full picture. Regulators don't have the full picture.
One of the problems that goes back to a fundamental problem, transparency. We don't know what these terms are, how long they're holding it, what rights they have to be reimbursed, etc.
Even though these folks are giving out loans like banks, they aren't regulated like banks. There's no oversight on loan sheets or independent checks on how healthy the borrowing company actually is. Meanwhile, investment managers point to private credit as a leading possible cause of the next financial crisis, and my mom's hall pass, Jamie Dimon, has said that there could be hell to pay if private credit starts to crack. But while the risks are growing, so too is private credit also, with one estimate saying that the industry could triple by 2030. That's triple, as in triple. And all this growth could be making things riskier, or at least weirder, with loans financed in all kinds of ways for all kinds of stuff.
It could be backed by millions of transactions, like buy now, pay later transactions, or Peloton contracts. Like, you can buy private credit debt that's backed by music royalties. Like, there are people that take out loans to get elective plastic surgery, and you could buy bonds that are backed by that. Those are actually mostly public, but some of those deals are private. So as the scope of what private credit entails gets bigger, there's a lot more to choose from, and some of it is pretty safe and some of it is not. It's all kind of complicated. Complexity breeds risk. If you're going to edit all that stuff out, just stick with, like, it's complicated and complexity breeds risk.
I'm thinking maybe I should have just edited all that out and said it's complicated and complexity breeds risk. Too late. You can't change this stuff once it's in the camera. Everybody wants loans now, and private credit firms are fighting hard to hand them out. Lenders are reportedly competing with each other by taking on more risk, dishing out bigger loans with looser requirement for borrowers in order to win more business. Plus, banks, the very institutions that private credit was originally billed as the alternative to, are getting in on the action. Even regular people are getting involved. Ew. But unlike institutional investors, these normals have a finite amount of money, so they might panic and pull out when things get ugly. And that can affect the whole system. In general, experts and regulators alike are both concerned with what economists call mo money, mo problems.
They're growing exponentially, becoming a systemic problem, not just a one-off sideline. There is virtually no regulation. They're not regulated as the banks are by the Federal Reserve, the Office of Comptroller and Currency, the state banking regulators. And the clock is ticking.
Indeed, the clock is ticking, but there's no way of knowing how much time we have left. It's like a tick-tock, tick-tock you can't hear. Like a silent clock. Scary stuff, huh? Private credit is a lot of things. It's a lending system that provides cash for riskier businesses, that's largely unregulated, that's generated high returns and captured Wall Street's attention while growing their wallets. But it's also a black box of interconnected financial relationships that's growing and changing rapidly, and there's nary a peephole through which we can peep. But I guess maybe what you don't know can't hurt you. For good work, I'm Dan Toomey.
Breaking news. What he didn't know did hurt him. Shocking news out of Manhattan today, where acclaimed journotherapist Dan Toomey wandered out into the street without knowing a bus was headed directly at him. Despite looking one way, Toomey neglected to look the other way in case any bus was driving in the opposite direction down the road, which this one was. The incident, while horrific, also contradicted Toomey's final words, "What you don't know can't hurt you," an age-old saying that experts have disproven time and time again.
No matter how hard we try, it appears that many things we don't know can hurt you, and hurt you a lot.
Never learning what that rash on your arm is, that can hurt you.
Not knowing that a giant cartoon piano is about to fall on your head and turn your teeth into cartoon piano keys, that can certainly hurt you.
And of course, wandering into the street without looking to see if there's a bus going 45 miles an hour ready to squash you. If that can't hurt you, then my name isn't Professor John Rollins.
For New York News at 2, I'm not getting that lump checked out. It'll be fine.